Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
So, was it about a week ago, we had a fabulous expert that we interviewed for our Powrsuit members, and her name's Alana Kaloon, and she's probably the second person to raise this philosophy with us. And so we just thought let's dig into it a little bit in the podcast this week. And it is a concept called the Stockdale Paradox, named after a military leader. We'll go into that in a little bit. And she is the second person after Shannon Huffman-Paulson, who you may have heard of before in these podcasts, another expert who's come and contributed to the Powrsuit network. She was, I think she was the first woman, at least one of the first women to fly Apache helicopters. So the attack helicopters in the US Army. She was the youngest woman or the first woman or something to climb the highest mountain in the US. She's the real boss, basically. She's been through it. She's come out the other side of a lot of things. As has Alana, and both of them have faced some real challenges, like genuine challenges in their lives. And so we thought it was interesting that both of them brought up the Stockdale Paradox as a way they navigate them. Do you want to dig into what this paradox is, Kristen?
No, I would love to set the scene of where it came from and the storytelling, but what I'd love you to do is describe what it is. And I think it's good for us to question what the heck is a paradox? Why is it called that? But anyway, you describe what it is and we'll dig in.
We were trying to figure out what a paradox is, because to me this doesn't feel like a paradox at all, but now I'm wondering if I know what a paradox even means. So the Stockdale paradox is that to get through really hard times, you need to do two things simultaneously that seem like they contradict each other, which I wonder if that's the paradox part, because they do contradict each other. So the first thing you need to do is really clearly, factually recognize how hard things are. No sugarcoating, like really understand how difficult things are. And then at the second part of this, which is the paradox, the contradictory part, is to have genuine belief that you'll make it through. So I suppose that totally makes sense. It's the paradox of holding those two things at the same time, the genuine faith that things will work out alongside the factual reality that things are pretty bad right now. And keeping them running side by side and holding them both and being able to navigate both of them, because I think most of us either are optimists or pessimists, and this is sort of challenging us to really be realists in situation with a healthy dose of optimism thrown in.
Okay, I went down a rabbit hole of what a paradox is, because you know when you see a word and you know it, but you like it would be a challenge to explain for multiple reasons. We don't often use that word in our everyday vocab, um, as we do collect them. But this is a paradox is a statement that seems contradictory or impossible on the surface, but when you look closer, it kind of makes sense. So the classic example is the liar's paradox. This statement is false. If it's true, then it's false. But if it's false, then it's true. It ties itself in a knot, and that's what makes a paradox. It can't resolve neatly into one answer. My brain capacity is not going there today, so it is what it is. I think it's seemingly contradictory, but it's not. That's a paradox, which is why this is so beautiful, because it's seemingly contradictory. Like, how can you be brutally face the facts but be optimistic and hopeful? How can you hold those two things at once? But you can, and these incredible leaders do.
So can you explain a little bit about old Jim Stockdale, who this paradox is named after, and how it came about?
Good old Jim Stockdale.
Oh, good old Jim. Good old Jim.
Okay. He was an admiral, a US Navy pilot, and he got shot down by Vietnam in 1965, and he spent 8 years as a prisoner of war, a POW, in a camp called Hanoi Hilton. I imagine it was nothing like a Hilton, because he was tortured countless times. There was no release date. There was no guarantee that he'd ever see his family again. Now when he got out, old, Jim Collins, who's another, famous dude at good old Jim. Good old Jim wrote this book, Good
Gyms United.
They were so nice catch. He wrote the book Good to Great, which, published in 2001, popular business book, Good to Great, or self-help, whatever we wanna call it. Anyway, Collins interviewed Stockdale, and he said how he survived when so many others didn't, and Stockdale's answers were blunt, as you can imagine, an admirable US Navy pilot. He said, that he effectively was really blunt, and he just said, um, the ones who didn't make it were the optimists, which is the paradox, isn't it? It was the realists, not the pessimists or the optimists, but the ones who kind of held these two. Actually, I'll go into the optimist thing firstly. He said the ones who kept saying we'll be out by Christmas, which you think if you're marooned on an island, you'll be like, I'll be rescued by tomorrow. There's this concept of holding on to hope, right? But then Christmas would come and go, and then Easter and Thanksgiving. And as he described it, they died of a broken heart. So Jim Stockdale didn't deny that things were terrible. He just refused to tie his survival to a fantasy, what he felt was unrealistic fantasy, be it optimistic or pessimistic, as in, like, we're screwed. So he held on to the faith that he'd get out, but he faced the reality of where he was every single day. And it was actually Jim Collins that named it the Stockdale Paradox after that conversation.
Have you ever been to the Hanoi Hilton, the prison?
No, I haven't. I'm embarrassed. I When I was in Hanoi, it was like a tech business trip, so that feels, we did do a thing, not in Hanoi though, in Saigon, but no. Is it amazing and sad
Well,
and
it's a very interesting place, and I think this is, like, total tangent, but it's something that makes you realize how history is defined by who you hear it from. And so and even now I feel bad saying old John Jim Stockdale because like what a an extraordinary human being. And I feel like I was very flippant because surviving that would have been incredible. It was interesting. I've been a couple of times years and years ago, and then last year when went to Vietnam. And what I find really interesting is like there is so much around who treated who badly and how ethically were people treated in the prison. Spend a lot of time talking about how great they were to all their prisoners. And my dad was in Vietnam, so I came home and said, "So, Dad, just really curious to know how your perception of this, which was very different." Dad was not in the Hanoi Hilton at the time, obviously, but yes, it would have been an incredibly brutal environment, like looking at those rooms where you're in tiny little beds, but wall to wall with people, all of that sort of stuff that we can all only imagine from some of these situations. And that's what I find so interesting about this. Like that kind of blind hope with sort of fantasyland, living in fantasyland, I can see how that would chip away over time. And then on the flip side, being so pessimistic at the start that you couldn't see any hope, that would lead to you giving up as well. Like you can see quite obviously how both of those two things, when there is no certainty and you don't know the outcome, how they actually lead to you really giving up or falling apart, and how both of those are really emotional reactions. And I like how the Stockdale Paradox brings in the facts of like, you actually, it is okay to acknowledge the facts as they are. And we've talked about this quite a lot with when we talk about navigating change and the stories we tell ourselves and how often we wrap all sorts of stuff around plain facts. And yeah, it just strikes me that of course that would be true, but it is much harder to practice than it is to hear about
I
in theory.
I have been reflecting on hope in the past few years because what I realize about myself is I always look forward to things, or there's a hope that things will be better, faster, stronger, healthier, like whatever it is. Like I think the human nature is one. Well, for many, not for everyone. To be fair, not all of our brains are wired this way, but we do genuinely hope that tomorrow is better than today, or if things are really bad, there's always this hope, and I think that's an interesting concept that optimism, if we were to correlate the terms, I like how Shannon Huffman Polson calls it grounded optimism. There's not this blind optimism of everything, she'll be right, everything's going to be okay. But there's a sense of, due to all the things we know about this situation, there are steps we can take, or things are likely to be okay, and we have to take action to get there. And I can only imagine what Jim Stockdale was like. Was he first of all had to face the brutal facts, the reality of survival in a place like that every day, consumed with how to uh, get food and help one another and um, I don't know, to survive effectively on a daily basis. But equally, he would have had a number of grounded optimistic statements in his head of this too shall pass, like the war likely won't last forever, and there are incredible people out there that are at all levels all around the world looking to bring this to resolution, and our training is going to keep us alive, and common sense and da 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 da. So this concept of he had hope, which is critical to survival, from what I understand, and I listen to real survival stories, and there's this real belief and hope in, like, to keep them alive, like, to see their families again or, all that stuff. But then there's the grounded optimism of, that it isn't blind positivity. Like, it's genuinely hard, but I believe we'll get through it due to XYZ.
Yes, and I think we see this in all sorts of different situations, not just in very, very brutal prisoner of war camps. And one of the things that really shines out to me, and actually, when you just mentioned real survival stories, I was listening to one this morning. I find it fascinating how often, when people have survived something, they put it down to their military training. It's quite often ex military. And what I find is really interesting about that is often, like, I listened to this one where they survived this hovercraft accident, and my assumption is most of the people on there didn't have military training and they still survived, but the training had given them the faith and confidence that they could do it, and so that's how they saw that survival originating from, that kind of that grounding in, "I have the skills, I have the mindset, I have the training." And I think about that when we apply it to our careers, because there's been a couple of things recently, even, I mean, and like, let's not even try and pretend we're comparing it to a prisoner, but things like redundancies, like I have a friend who I think really personifies the Stockdale Paradox. Like, she was made redundant twice in a year. She was very aware that financially, that emotionally, it was diabolical. It was a pretty brutal time. And she was very able to very quickly go, "Well, I know I'm not going to be unemployed forever. I know I'm going to get another job. I know this is a short patch of time and that everything's going to change." And so she was able to keep that optimism while not sort of not checking her finances and sort of head in the sand about everything that was happening. And I've noticed her attitude at work. I often see, like, she'll be faced with all of these situations as you are in a leadership position where you actually have no idea what you're doing, but you have full confidence in yourself because you know how to figure out what to do. And so I feel like that that kind of attitude, you start to see it embedded in people as they kind of build up this sense of, like, "I've got this," and, like, "I don't control everything." It's almost self-leadership. "I don't control everything. Brutal bad things are gonna happen to me, but I have courage and confidence that I've got this." And you can spot it once you see it, you know?
Yeah, I was chatting with someone earlier about a real career crossroads, and it was interesting the language that we use. And it's, oh, I'm in a, like, they immediately revert to, I know this is apologetic, because they're like, this is really complicated, and I know this is really hard, and I'm so sorry for, dumping on you, this on you, da da da. And the simplest thing I could say back was, actually, this isn't that hard. This is very simple. You're just in a state of a bunch of unknowns in an unknown. And the amazing thing is that, based on all of your past life experience of growing a family and of moving places and doing interesting different careers, shows that you are able to take the skills and implement uh, necessary steps if you don't know, like, to fill in the gaps. And I'm like, this is just that. So don't overcomplicate this. This isn't, she wanted to chalk it up to, like, confidence and kind of overcomplicate a matter of, I don't know what my next step is. And I'm like, well, that's an amazing place to be. Like, just sit in that space, the brutal reality of, I do not like, don't make it anything bigger than that. It's just, I don't know what my next step is. And then only then you can go, but I've got myself this far. Like, I'm literally, however many old, I said I'm a I don't know, 48-year-old woman and I'm dressed, I've got my glasses and we've come into work on a Monday and we've probably exercised and we had, like I'm like, we just take the next step to figure out the next step. So I was trying not to, what is it? It's not, I was trying not to be disrespectful about her state and maybe how she's feeling, but equally about, but you know how to get yourself out of it.
Yeah, that would be a good example of someone who's in pessimist mode and just falling into the emotion of it and not being able to see the factual side, which I think is um, yeah, I think that's really interesting. We were talking about that this weekend in another context around we are not taught, and most people aren't comfortable in ambiguity. And you see all the time in workflows of when it's coming to problem solving, and people were like, "What's the answer?" And it's like, "Oh no, you have to sit in this lack of clarity for a while. Like you actually have to sit in it, and it feels uncomfortable." And we don't tend to have that sort of discovery, sort of figuring out what it is embedded in any work processes, and I think that's reflected in conversations like that, that we don't see that as a stage of figuring out what to do next or problem solving or any sort of project either. We just kind of assume somehow the answer comes and then you action it, and we really underestimate the amount of time we need to spend in that ambiguous mode of figuring things out. So I think we should cover that another day because I
Yeah,
think
well, we
that's really
should, but
interesting.
it reminded me that we have on a number of occasions talked about the beginner mindset and that the more often that you change or challenge yourself or put yourself into new situations and become a beginner in a room, in an arena, in a at a table, in whatever it might be, is you are flexing a muscle going from I have the ability to go from uncertainty to certainty by learning things. And I think navigating for me, navigating change with choosing new roles or whatever, moving or whatever that might be. It is scary, and the brutal facts are it's hard and tricky and emotionally trying. But if you trust yourself to learn the things, and that you will adjust in a new environment and learn all the things you need to learn, you just again you sit in it. I just want to call out one point in my life though where I genuinely did have a panic, and such a random memory that just popped up as my brain does, but I think I was about 2 weeks from giving birth, and, I might have said this before, but my first pregnancy was a surprise and was not expecting it, had only just been married. I was traumatized by the whole thing. I wasn't even, like, that
Love you,
maternal.
Madeline.
Like, I've never even held a baby, blah. Anyway, and I was 2 weeks away from giving birth to this baby, and I was so freaked out. Like, I was just out of my this world meltdown because what if I couldn't go through labor? And what if I couldn't? And it was like the ultimate unknown. Like I had no reference in my history to show I knew how to care for other humans or get myself through incredibly painful whatever. It was wild. And so I imagine some scenarios I can see people doing it. If I were a prisoner of war, I could see myself doing it. You've never
Well, and also I think it's fair to say that I can imagine that Jim Stockdale himself didn't maintain that perfect balance the whole time. But one opportunity I think we all get every day, and actually we have a friend, shout out Anna, who completed her first triathlon in the weekend. And I think sports is such a great example of building the Stockdale Paradox because um I've been a runner for years and years and years, and somewhere along the way, you learn that you can keep putting one foot in front of another, no matter how painful and puffed and tired, and your legs are screaming to stop and your lungs are bursting. You can keep going because it doesn't get any worse. And you sort of build up this understanding of the Stockdale Paradox. It's painful, it's brutal, it's hard. And I can see myself getting to the finish line still. And I know that's slightly different because you have more control over those circumstances, but I do think, often, unlike maybe when you are in a prison, although even then you've got opportunities to influence, I'm sure, in very micro ways, we do have more control than we realize sometimes. But building up that kind of, and it doesn't have to be sports, but building up that resilience to doing hard things and to me, yeah, anything related to like kind of recognizing you can push a bit further, which is why I was obsessed with watching what's his name climb the Sky Tower in Taiwan. And we're all obsessed. Well, maybe not all of us. A lot of us are obsessed with the Olympics and ultra marathoners and all of that sort of stuff where you can watch people push through these incredibly hard things and still have their eyes on the prize, and I think that's sort of probably a positive way of looking at how we approach this.
Yeah, I love it. I was reminded of something else, but it's already slipped out of my head while you were chatting about, oh, I know what it was. You said resilience, which I think is the muscle for the, Stockdale Paradox. It is, your resilience is the thing that gives you the facing the brutal facts, like, you can actually start to stomach some really tough things, as you will have to do in increasingly, increasing scope of responsibilities and leadership, but equally, having a pragmatic plan or having the right people around you or knowing the right steps you have to take and thinking, we will get through this because we've got the skills and the people and the timeline, da da da. But it was Shannon Huffman Polson. When you said resilience, I asked her, I recall saying, "Look, I'm raising kids. I think there are some studies out there. There's certainly a lot of chatter out there that these next generations aren't as resilient. A bunch of anecdotal evidence, possibly even evidence as well on that front. And so I said, "How do you build resilience in the next generation and our young people? You're a parent, I'm a parent, da da da." And I'll never forget it. And I'll never forget it. She said, "Oh, yeah, we just finished dropping our son off at the Mexican border and he needed to make his way home." And she lives in Colorado. And I think I almost fell off my chair because I was like, right. I think she had a 12-year-old son and she basically just dropped him off at the Mexican border. And in order to build resilience and grit in her child, and of course, that wasn't the end all be all. And there were a number of really wonderful things she said, including gratitude and really focusing on a practice of gratitude. But I thought, right, okay, that felt pretty extreme.
I mean, I can only imagine the adventurous nature of her family. I think this is a thing we struggle with a lot these days as well, and we talk a lot about. I mean, I end up in a lot of conversations about children, despite not being a parent, and how we have an instinct to protect them from all pain and suffering. But actually, what we create by doing that is a lot of pain and suffering because when you don't know, and I've been using Brooklyn Beckham as an example, don't cancel me. But when you grow up in an environment of massive privilege, and I know that doesn't necessarily mean you get the emotional needs met by your parents, etc. Um, but your understanding of hardship gets very warped. And I think and like Alana was such a great example of this as well, of the things that she looks back on as the biggest reasons why she's been so successful are the things that she had to come through. And they were the challenges that she faced in her life that made her who she is, and I think we forget that, and we want to, like, cuddle our children and make them not experience those things, but, like, those are the biggest gifts you can give to
I
your kids,
know, I
that
know.
kind of.
It's almost against biology thing. 'Cause I think biologically, it's like you're meant to protect, right? And I know that people who, have struggled with losing a child is that, like, your only job was to protect, and so I can see again, that is a paradox, isn't it? Is we're meant to protect, yet we're meant to let go and have them do really hard,
Another paradox, well done.
I feel like it's gonna escape my brain soon, but anyway, I think I got it. Now that I've done the example, I think I've got it. But, yeah, it's such an interesting, thing, isn't it? Because that is a, it is a I was thinking of Danielle Brown, another interview that we did. She was a Paralympian and she was born to a very active and stoic family in the UK. And she was born with a excruciatingly painful foot condition in which she actually couldn't use her feet and was in a wheelchair by the age of, I don't know, teens. And I think she's in and out of a wheelchair. But nonetheless, her parents would, she even used these words, they would force me to hike. Like we had to go on these family hikes every weekend. And I was not an exception. Even though I had this debilitating condition, I had to go on these hikes. And she said it was because of that that I ultimately can track it to winning a gold, being a Paralympian gold medalist. And she equally went to the regular Olympics as well and competed there. And I think did very, very well. But yeah, it's interesting. Again, that paradox.
Yes, and I think when we say all this, don't be mistaken for thinking these parents just threw their kids out and forced them to do stuff that was beyond their capability. These were very well thought out uh, parenting situations where they obviously knew that they could push their children to that point. And we've called it before safe failure. Like, you don't want to be throwing your 12-year-old who's never caught the bus before to the Mexican border to walk back to Colorado or wherever. But my assumption from a lot of these stories, and actually knowing the people behind them, is that there is a lot of flex built in there of going, I'm just going to stretch you a bit further and stretch you a bit further. I'm curious about, just to wrap up, the word resilience versus, when I've been reading into the Stockdale Paradox, the word courage is used a lot more than resilience. And I quite like courage for this because, firstly, resilience I think has been overused a lot recently and everyone's sick of hearing it. And I think we've lost what it means. But even though I think this is actually a really good use of it, I wonder if, like, it now ties into all sorts of stuff that, there's a lot of baggage with that word. Whereas courage feels more to me, forward looking and like, how do I feel scared and worried and all of the things and recognize how hard this is and also find the ability to do it anyway?
Hmm. One strikes me as it's interesting because I hear what you're saying with courage is actually, um yeah, it's interesting. I want for me, I think they go hand in hand, and the courage is taking the step, but the resilience is the muscle that's built from courage. So for me, it is courage precedes resilience, and we only build our resilience through courage. So I think actually they can go hand in hand, but I think you're right. And rather than focus on resilience because it only comes after action, after courage, just focus on the courageous part and do the courageous thing, and you will be rewarded with resilience.
What are you gonna do that's hard this week?
Um, Thanks for putting me on the spot.
I was like, quickly go to my calendar and see what I've got on.
Well, yeah, what am I gonna do that's hard? I will think about it. I've talked about, pickleball a lot, and I said to Kyle, "We should really start it," and I know that's not hard, but that is still, like, he and I showing up at a new place and being complete beginners and doing
I
it.
think it's a perfect example.
Yeah.
I feel like not all of us have to ship ourselves off into
I just can't
isolation,
I just
like,
can't promise it's this week, but because we spoke about it on the weekend, I think it's gonna happen in the next month.
my gosh, you're gonna be a thwacker.
I've never done it, and I'm like, I think
Watch out,
we I
pickleball
know.
world champs 2027.
Yeah, like, I think we do need, like, a together sport, and I'm like, maybe it's pickleball.
I like it.
He really wants it to be fishing, but I'm, like, thinking maybe it's gonna be pickleball.
I also feel like Kyle quite likes fishing on his own as well. Like, I think he's like a sometimes activity, sometimes did I tell you, by the way, Kyle and I text a lot about fishing?
Kyle now, unfortunately, though, needs me for fishing because I have to kayak the long line
He's
out.
got Yeah, he has been complimented on his use of wide variety of emojis. He's very good at emojis. He picks a good emoji for the right situation. I'm gonna try I've, talking about running a lot because it's top of mind because I had about 6 weeks where I didn't go. I went walked to the Queen Charlotte track and then kind of fell out of the habit over holidays. So last week was my, brutal, re-entry into running world, and it was brutal. Being in your 40s and starting running again. Like, I have sort of had patches between running my entire life, and I can whip back up real quick. And I am still plodding like I'm just starting. And oh, it's so hard. And the first time I went out, I ran for 15 minutes before I needed to walk. And I was like devastated because I have terribly unhealthy relationship with exercise in that I always feel like a failure when I do it. And then I went out again this weekend and ran 25 minutes before I needed to walk and finished and said straight away to Kyla, that was terrible. And then I stopped myself and went, I ran for 25 minutes and then I only had to walk the last bit. And it was so funny how I had to really wrangle my way out of coming back to offload how much of a disaster it was. And I was like, okay, be more Stockdale-y.
Be more paradoxical. Um,
Yeah.
very very good. Amazing. Everyone, please feel free, to reply with any thoughts and what hard thing you would like to try, and any thoughts on Stockdale Paradox. And, yeah, check out powrsuit.com. You know where to reach us, you know what to do, and we'll catch you next time, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Bye.